24 hours. That's how long his shift had been. 24 hours of alarms, smoke, exhaustion, and chaos. And all Jake wanted was to get home, to collapse on his couch, to hug his two little girls, to forget about everything for just a few hours. But then he heard it. At first, he thought it was his imagination, his mind playing tricks after too many hours without sleep. But there it was again. A sound, faint, desperate, coming from somewhere near the storm drain on the side of the road. And Jake did what most people would do. He kept walking, because he was tired, because he'd already saved enough lives for one day, because whatever it was, someone else could handle it. But then it happened again. Louder this time. More urgent. And something inside him just wouldn't let it go. Something that whispered, "What if nobody else stops? What if you're the only chance?" And so he turned around, walked back those 20 steps he'd already taken, and knelt down next to that storm drain. The smell hit him first. The kind of smell that tells you something's been trapped down there for way too long. And then he saw the eyes. Two tiny points of light reflecting back at him from the darkness. Terrified eyes. Eyes that had been waiting, hoping, praying that someone, anyone, would finally look down and see them. It was a kitten. Couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Soaking wet from the rain that had poured through the city the night before. Shivering so hard that Jake could see it even in the dim light. And when their eyes met, something happened. Something Jake couldn't explain. It was like that kitten looked straight into his soul and said, "Please, please don't leave me here." Jake reached down, tried to grab him, but the kitten backed away. Not because he didn't want help, but because he'd learned not to trust. Learned that hands can hurt, that voices can lie. That hope is dangerous when you've been let down too many times. And Jake got it. He understood that fear. He'd seen it in people he'd rescued. That moment when they're not sure if you're there to save them or if it's just another cruel trick. So he did something different. He didn't force it. Didn't try to corner him. He just sat there. Right there on the cold pavement, in his dirty uniform, exhausted beyond belief, and he waited. And he talked. Not in that high-pitched baby voice people use with animals. Just normal. Just real. He said, "Hey buddy, I know you're scared. I know you don't know me. But I promise I'm not gonna hurt you. I promise I'm gonna get you out of there." And maybe the kitten understood the words. Or maybe he just understood the tone. The sincerity. The gentleness in a voice that had spent all night shouting orders and fighting fires. But something shifted. And slowly, so slowly that Jake barely noticed at first, the kitten moved forward. One tiny paw. Then another. Until he was close enough that Jake could reach down and scoop him up. The moment Jake held him, he knew this was bad. This wasn't just a scared kitten who needed a meal and a warm bed. This was a kitten who was seriously sick. His breathing was shallow, labored. His tiny body was ice cold despite the mild evening air. And his eyes, now that Jake could see them up close, were cloudy. Infected. This kitten needed help. Real help. Not just a good Samaritan with a kind heart. Jake pulled out his phone. Called his wife, Sarah. And before she could even say hello, he said, "Babe, I found a kitten. He's in bad shape. I need to take him to the emergency vet." And there was silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. Because Sarah was allergic to cats. Had been her whole life. And they lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with their 2 daughters, Emma and Lily. There was no room for a cat. No money for expensive vet bills. No time to take care of another living thing. But then Sarah said something Jake didn't expect. She said, "Is he gonna make it if you don't?" And Jake looked down at the tiny creature in his hands. At the way he was struggling to breathe. At the trust in those cloudy eyes. And he said, "No, I don't think so." And Sarah sighed. That deep, resigned sigh that meant she knew what was coming. And she said, "Then take him. We'll figure it out." The emergency vet clinic was 15 minutes away. But it felt like an eternity. Because with every passing second, Jake could feel the kitten getting weaker. Could feel his little body going limp. And he drove faster than he should have. Prayed harder than he had in years. Made promises to God, to the universe, to anyone listening that if this kitten survived, he'd never ignore another cry for help again. The vet tech took one look at the kitten and rushed him to the back. And Jake stood there in the waiting room, covered in soot and grime and cat hair, feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt standing in front of a burning building. Because at least with fires, he could do something. He could fight. He could save. But here, all he could do was wait. Dr. Martinez came out 20 minutes later, and the look on her face told Jake everything before she even opened her mouth. It wasn't good. The kitten had severe pneumonia, dehydration, malnutrition, eye infections in both eyes. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was his heart. Dr. Martinez explained that the kitten had a congenital heart defect, a hole between the chambers that was preventing proper blood flow. And without surgery, a surgery that cost more than Jake made in 2 months, the kitten wouldn't survive. Jake felt his stomach drop, because he didn't have that kind of money. Nobody in their right mind would spend that much on a stray kitten they just found. It wasn't practical. It wasn't logical. It wasn't something a responsible father of 2 should even consider. But when Dr. Martinez asked him what he wanted to do, Jake heard himself say, "Do the surgery. Do whatever it takes." And that's when reality hit. Because now he had to go home and tell Sarah that he'd just committed their emergency fund, their safety net, their backup plan, to save a kitten. And he had no idea how she was going to react. He had no idea if their marriage could survive this decision. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try. Sarah was waiting up when he got home at 2 in the morning. Emma and Lily were asleep, thank God, because Jake didn't know how to explain this to them yet. And when he told Sarah what he'd done, she just stared at him. For a long time. Not angry. Not happy. Just processing. And then she said, "You know we can't afford this, right? You know this means no vacation this summer. No new furniture. No safety net if something goes wrong." And Jake nodded. Because he knew all of that. Had thought about all of that. And still made the choice anyway. And Sarah stood up, walked over to him, and wrapped her arms around him. And she said, "You're an idiot. But you're my idiot. And if this kitten means that much to you, then we'll make it work." And Jake felt tears he didn't know he was holding back finally fall. Because in that moment he loved his wife more than he thought possible. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Jake didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Just sat there on the couch, checking his phone every 5 minutes, waiting for an update. And when Dr. Martinez finally called, he was so nervous he could barely hold the phone steady. But her voice was calm, steady, and she said, "He made it through. He's stable. But the next 48 hours are critical." Jake told the girls that morning, showed them a picture the vet had sent, and their faces lit up in a way he hadn't seen in months. Emma, who was 7, immediately asked if they could keep him. Lily, who was 5, wanted to know if he had a name. And Jake realized he hadn't even thought about it. Hadn't thought past just keeping him alive. And Emma said, "We should call him Lucky. Because he's lucky you found him." But Jake shook his head. Because it wasn't the kitten who was lucky. It was him. It was his family. It was everyone who got to witness what happened when you choose compassion over convenience. And so he said, "How about Hero? Because he's a fighter. And fighters are heroes." And the girls loved it. Squealed with excitement. Started planning where Hero would sleep and what toys they'd get him and how they'd take care of him together. The next 2 weeks were the hardest. Hero had to stay at the clinic for observation. And every day, Jake would stop by after his shift to visit. To sit with him. To talk to him. And every day, Hero got a little stronger. A little more alert. A little more like the kitten he was supposed to be. And when Dr. Martinez finally said he could come home, Jake felt like he'd won the lottery. Bringing Hero into the apartment was an adjustment. Sarah's allergies flared up immediately. Her eyes watered. Her nose ran. She sneezed constantly. And Jake felt guilty. Felt like maybe he'd been selfish. Maybe he'd put his need to save something above his family's comfort. But Sarah didn't complain. Not once. She just started researching. Found out about allergy shots. About air purifiers. About ways to manage living with a cat even when your body doesn't want you to. And something beautiful happened. Slowly, over the course of months, Sarah's allergies got better. Not gone, but manageable. And more than that, she fell in love with this little creature who'd come into their lives uninvited. With the way he'd curl up in the girls' laps while they did homework. With the way he'd greet Jake at the door after every shift, meowing like he'd been worried sick. With the way he'd somehow made their small apartment feel more like a home. Emma and Lily took their responsibility seriously. They fed Hero every morning before school, changed his water, cleaned his litter box without being asked. And Jake watched them grow, watched them become more caring, more responsible, more aware that their actions mattered, that they had the power to make a difference in someone's life, even if that someone was just a cat. But Hero wasn't just a cat. Hero became the heartbeat of their family. When Jake came home from particularly rough shifts, the kind where he couldn't save everyone, the kind that haunted him, Hero would sense it, would jump up on his lap and purr. And somehow, that simple act of love from a creature who'd been given a second chance reminded Jake why he did what he did. Why saving lives mattered. Why every single one counted. Sarah started therapy for her cat allergy. Real immunotherapy. The kind with weekly shots and a long-term commitment. And when Jake asked her why she was going through all that trouble, she just smiled and said, "Because Hero's family. And you don't give up on family." And Jake realized that this kitten had done something incredible. He'd brought them closer together. Had given them a shared purpose. Had shown them that love isn't about convenience. It's about sacrifice. The girls told everyone at school about Hero. About how their dad had saved him. About the surgery. About the recovery. And their teachers noticed something. Emma, who'd always been shy, started speaking up more. Started advocating for animal welfare. Started a fundraiser to help other families afford emergency vet care. And Lily, who'd struggled with anxiety, found comfort in taking care of Hero. Found that when she felt scared, sitting with him and listening to his purr made everything better. Jake's fellow firefighters heard the story too. And one day, one of them brought in a puppy he'd found abandoned at a fire scene. Asked Jake what he should do. And Jake told him the same thing Sarah had told him. Is he gonna make it if you don't help? And his colleague looked at that puppy, and Jake could see the moment he decided. Could see the moment he chose compassion. And that started something. A ripple effect. More guys at the station started rescuing animals they found on calls. Started caring in ways they hadn't before. Hero's first birthday came around. And the family celebrated. Bought him a little cake made for cats. Gave him new toys. Took family photos. And Jake looked at those photos later that night and couldn't believe it had only been a year. It felt like Hero had always been part of their lives. Like there'd never been a time before him. And he thought about that moment at the storm drain. About how close he'd come to just walking away. And it terrified him. The thought of what their lives would be like if he hadn't turned around. Because Hero had changed everything. Had changed him. Had changed Sarah. Had changed their daughters. Had reminded them that in a world that can be harsh and cold and indifferent, small acts of kindness matter. That choosing to help, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's expensive, even when it doesn't make logical sense, is what makes us human. Sarah's allergies were now almost completely under control. She could cuddle Hero without immediate consequences. Could let him sleep at the foot of their bed without waking up miserable. And she'd joke that Hero had cured her. But Jake knew it was more than that. She'd made a choice. A choice to adapt. To overcome. To make room in her life for something that mattered to people she loved. And that choice had transformed her relationship with Hero from tolerance to genuine affection. The financial hit had been real. They'd had to cancel that summer vacation. Had to put off buying a new couch to replace the one that was falling apart. Had to tighten their budget in ways that weren't always comfortable. But they never regretted it. Not once. Because what they gained was worth so much more than what they'd given up. They'd gained a family member. A friend. A reminder that life isn't about accumulating things. It's about the connections we make. The lives we touch. The love we give and receive. Jake thought about all the animals out there right now. Sitting in storm drains. Hiding under cars. Trapped in places they can't escape from. Waiting for someone to stop. To notice. To care. And he thought about all the people who walk past them every day, who hear the cries and keep going, who see the suffering and look away. Not because they're bad people, but because they're tired, because they're busy, because they tell themselves someone else will handle it. And he wanted to tell them what he'd learned, that you don't have to be special to make a difference. You don't have to be rich or have lots of free time or have your life completely together. You just have to be willing to stop, willing to listen, willing to help even when it's hard, because that willingness is what separates a good person from a great one. Hiro was sleeping now, curled up in Emma's bed, his favorite spot. His breathing was steady, nothing like those labored breaths from that first night. His coat was shiny and healthy. His eyes were clear and bright. And watching him sleep, so peaceful and content, Jake felt a sense of pride he couldn't quite put into words. Because he'd done that. He'd given this creature a life worth living. And in return, Hiro had given him something too. Perspective. Purpose. Proof that goodness still exists in the world. Sometimes Jake wondered what would have happened if he hadn't gone back. If he'd just kept walking. If he'd let exhaustion win. And every time he thought about it, he felt a chill. Because that version of his life, the one without Hiro, felt empty somehow. Incomplete. Like he would have been missing something essential without even knowing it. The girls were talking about becoming veterinarians now. Both of them. They wanted to help animals like Dr. Martinez had helped Hiro. Wanted to be the person who could tell scared families that everything was going to be okay. And Jake encouraged them. Told them they could be anything they wanted to be. Do anything they set their minds to. And he meant it. Because if they had half the courage that Hiro had shown fighting for his life, they could accomplish anything. Sarah had become an advocate too. Started volunteering at the local animal shelter. Started fostering kittens who needed temporary homes until they could be adopted. And Jake would come home to find their apartment full of tiny meowing chaos. And he'd laugh. Because who was he to complain? He'd started all of this. He'd opened that door. And now his whole family had walked through it. But the best moments were the quiet ones. The evenings when Jake would sit on the couch after a long shift, and Hiro would jump up beside him. Would headbutt his hand asking for pets. Would purr so loud it sounded like a motorboat. And Jake would sit there, stroking his soft fur, feeling the warmth of his small body, and think about how lucky they both were. How lucky that Jake had heard that cry. That he'd turned around. That he'd made the choice to care. Because that's all it really takes. One person deciding that a life matters. One person choosing to act instead of walking away. One person being brave enough to care when it would be easier not to. And that one decision creates ripples. Changes families. Changes communities. Changes the world in small but meaningful ways. Jake shared Hiro's story with everyone who would listen. Posted updates on social media. Talked about it at community events. Not because he wanted recognition, but because he wanted people to understand. To know that they have the power to save lives too. That every single person reading this, watching this, hearing this, has the capacity to be someone's hero. You don't need superpowers. You don't need a badge or a uniform. You just need to stop. To see. To care. And if you're watching this right now, maybe you're thinking about that time you saw an animal in distress and didn't help. Maybe you're feeling guilty. Or maybe you're thinking about all the reasons why you couldn't. Why it wasn't possible. Why someone else was better suited for it. And that's okay. Jake thought those things too. Every single one of them. But he did it anyway. And that made all the difference. The truth is, there are millions of animals out there right now who need what Hiro needed. Who need someone to turn around. Someone to stop. Someone to care enough to help even when it's inconvenient. And maybe you can't save them all. Nobody can. But you can save one. And to that one, you'll be everything. You'll be their whole world. Their second chance. Their miracle. Hiro stretched in his sleep. His little paws twitching like he was dreaming about running. And Jake wondered what he dreamed about. Did he remember that storm drain? Did he remember the fear? Or had love and safety and family erased those memories? Jake hoped it was the latter. Hoped that Hiro only remembered the good parts. The warmth. The food. The cuddles from two little girls who adored him. The safety of a home where he'd never be abandoned again. And that's what it's really about, isn't it? Giving someone a chance to forget the bad and remember only the good. Giving them a life so full of love that the pain becomes just a distant memory. Something that happened to someone else in another lifetime. Because that's the power of rescue. It doesn't just save a life. It transforms it. Completely and forever. Jake's daughters would grow up knowing that their dad was a hero twice over. Once for the job he did every day, running into burning buildings while others ran out. But more importantly, for the day he stopped at a storm drain and chose compassion. And that second lesson was the one that would shape them. That would make them the kind of adults who stop. Who help. Who care. Sarah kissed Jake on the forehead as she walked past. Smiled at Hero sleeping peacefully. And she whispered, "Best worst decision you ever made." And Jake laughed. Because she was right. It had been a terrible decision financially. A risky decision logically. But the best decision emotionally. Spiritually. Humanly. Because it had reminded all of them what truly matters. This story could end 1,000 different ways. But it ends here, in this moment, with a family that's stronger because they chose love. With a cat who's alive because someone chose to care. With 2 little girls who'll grow up believing that every life has value. That every creature deserves a chance. That being human means being kind. And maybe that's the real point. Maybe Hero didn't just get rescued that day. Maybe Jake did too. Maybe his whole family did. Because they learned something precious. They learned that the best parts of life aren't planned. They're not scheduled or budgeted or convenient. They're messy. They're expensive. They're exhausting. But they're worth it. God, they're worth it. So next time you hear a cry for help, next time you see eyes looking up at you desperately, next time you have the chance to be someone's hero, stop, just for a moment, stop, and ask yourself one simple question. Could I be the difference? Could I be the reason this story has a happy ending? And if the answer is yes, even a scared, uncertain yes, then do it. Take that leap. Make that sacrifice. Be that person. Because I promise you, absolutely promise you, that it will change you. It will make you better. It will remind you what it means to be truly alive. Hero yawns one more time. Opens his eyes just enough to look at Jake. And in that look is everything. Gratitude. Pure, unconditional, absolute love. The kind of love that asks for nothing but gives everything. And Jake pets his head gently. Whispers, "You're welcome, buddy. You're so welcome." Because that's all any of us really want. To matter. To be seen. To be saved when we're drowning. And when we give that to someone else, when we become that person for another living being, we receive something in return. We receive purpose. Meaning. The knowledge that we made a choice that echoed beyond ourselves. This is the story of a firefighter who saved a kitten. But really, it's the story of how a kitten saved a family. How one small life made 4 big lives better. How choosing love over logic created something beautiful. And how you, yes you, have the same power. The same opportunity. The same chance to be extraordinary. All you have to do is stop. Listen. And choose to care. That's it. That's the whole secret. And if you do, if you take that chance, your life will never be the same. Because once you've experienced what it means to truly save something, once you've felt that connection, that purpose, that love, you'll understand. You'll understand that this is what we're here for. This is why we exist. To help. To save. To love. Hero is family now. Forever. And that decision, that split-second choice to turn around and go back to that storm drain, created something that will last a lifetime. Created memories. Created love. Created a bond that can never be broken. And that's the power of compassion. That's the magic of caring. That's the miracle that happens when someone decides that a life, any life, is worth saving. So go ahead. Be someone's hero today. You never know how it might change everything.